ask the Prime Minister to make a statement on the replacement of the Chancellor of the Exchequer during the current economic situation.
Mr. Speaker, with apologies to the Leader of the Opposition and the House, the PM is detained on urgent business. And they will have to make do.
I must hear the answer of why the Prime Minister is not here. Leader of the House.
I'm afraid you will have to make do with me, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has taken the decision to appoint my right honourable friend, the member for South West Surrey, one of the longest-serving and most experienced parliamentarians, as her Chancellor. Their overriding priority is to restore financial stability in the face of volatile global conditions. We will take whatever tough decisions are necessary and have made changes to the growth plan, which the Chancellor is waiting to update the House on as soon as this urgent question finishes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Right Honourable Member for Portsmouth North for answering the question put to the Prime Minister. I guess under this Tory government, everybody gets to be Prime Minister for 15 minutes. The country, Mr. Speaker, the country is in an economic crisis made in Downing Street. Because they've lost all credibility, government borrowing costs have soared, mortgage rates have ballooned, markets need reassuring. And there is long-term damage that can't be undone. Once you've crashed a car at 100 miles an hour, you've damaged it for good, and you're going to be paying much more on your insurance for years to come. And it's working people who will pay, left wondering if they can afford to stay in their homes if their hopes of owning a home haven't already been crushed. So now it's time for leaders to lead. But where is the Prime Minister? Hiding away, dodging questions, scared of her own shadow. The lady's not for turning up. Now it's time to be honest about the mistakes they made. But what does the Prime Minister say? My vision is right. My mission remains. I sacked my Chancellor, but I can't tell you why. And now is a time for consistent messaging. But what do we get? A Prime Minister saying absolutely no spending reductions. A Chancellor saying there will be cuts. A Prime Minister saying she's in charge. A Chancellor who thinks he's the CEO and she's just the chair. How can Britain get the stability it needs when all the government offers is grotesque chaos? How can Britain get the stability it needs when instead of leadership we have this utter vacuum? How can Britain get the stability it needs when the Prime Minister has no mandate from her party and no mandate from the country?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me start by saying I'm quite quietly confident that the Leader of the Opposition will not have his 15 minutes of fame. With regard to questions raised on economic policy, I will defer to the Chancellor. Honourable members will want time to question him fully and hear the detail. I do not wish to eat into that time. Our constituents will want to hear about the issues facing them, their bills, mortgages, benefits and their businesses. So I had wondered just what else the Leader of the Opposition wished to discuss in this UQ that would delay such an important statement. In his urgent question, he paints a contrast, so let me paint one too. The decision taken by our Prime Minister would have been a very tough one, politically and personally. Yet she has taken it, and she has done so. She has done so because it is manifestly in the national interest that she did. She did not hesitate to do so because her focus is on the well-being of every one of our citizens. It was the right thing to do, and whether you agree with it or not, it took courage to do it. In contrast, what the Right Honourable Gentleman has done today, at this most serious moment, took no courage or judgment or regard to the national interest. 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, when this Parliament was paralysed by Brexit, a general election would have been in the national interest, and he blocked it. Today, when the country needs some stability and urgent legislation to put through cost of living measures, and while we are in the middle of an economic war levelled at every school and hospital in this country, he now calls for one, and weeks of disruption and delay. We will take no lectures from the Honourable Gentleman on working in the national interest. I could point to his frustration. I could point to his frustration of us leaving the EU and campaigning for a second referendum. I could point to his support for the Right Honourable Member for Islington North and his positions on NATO, or his arguments against us leaving lockdown or our involvement with the EU Vaccines Agency, all against the national interest. And nor will we take any lectures on consistency of policy or messaging. The Right Honourable Gentleman has abandoned every single one of his pledges during the Labour leadership contest.
Look, both. I think the country also wants to hear what's being said. If I can't hear, they can't hear. So can we please listen to the Leader of the House? I'm sure it's coming to the end now. Leader of the House.
I am, Mr. Speaker. Which is why, even on our...
Order. Mr. Perkins, if you want to go and get a cup of tea, I'm more than happy to pay for it.
Which is why, Mr. Speaker, even on our toughest and most disappointing days, I will always be proud to sit on this side of the House. We will put the national interest first. Now let's get on and hear from the Chancellor.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to hear from the Leader of the House, more importantly, Sir Peter Bottomley.
I'm not sure it's more important. Can I say to my honourable friend that the Leader of the Opposition has reversed most of the things he said he'd do if he became leader. Yeah. If you have a short memory, it's only 9 months ago when some of his senior colleagues were circling saying whether there could be a better Leader of the Opposition than him. Yeah. And can I put it to the Leader of the House that when circumstances change, it's right for policy to change, and if what's announced today leads to a lower rate of inflation, a lower cost of borrowing, and a greater chance this country can get back to prosperity, it's worth doing.
Well, I agree with the Father of the House in what he says. The Right Honourable Gentleman opposite has reversed his position on economic justice, social justice, climate change, promoting peace and human rights, common ownership, defending migrants' rights, strengthening the rights of workers and trade unions, radical devolution of power, wealth and opportunity, equality and effective opposition to the Tories.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, Scotland's First Minister set out an optimistic, ambitious and credible economic plan for Scotland's future. A leader who spent over an hour setting out and answering questions on the positive case for our country's independence. It's a very stark contrast to a Prime Minister hiding in Downing Street. A Prime Minister terrified to answer for the mess she has made. The mess which will cause so much harm to all of our constituents. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to keep this short and to the point. Can the Leader of the House tell us exactly where on earth is the Prime Minister? And if she doesn't even have the backbone to show up here today, Is there really any point in her showing up here again? Surely time's up. She needs to go and let the people decide.
Well, I'm glad to hear the First Minister of Scotland made a statement. I'm hoping that shortly the House will be able to hear from the Chancellor of the Exchequer to set out the government's position. I'd be interested to know if the First Minister's statement included the tax dividend to every Scottish household of being a member of the United Kingdom.
Maria Miller.
Mr. Speaker, in the last 4 weeks, the facts are that the global economic conditions that we face have worsened. Now, the opposition may not want to acknowledge that, but that is the truth. Inflation rates have increased around the world, and in the United States are now the highest they've been since 1982. Does my right honourable friend agree that we should always be prepared to make the policy changes we need in the best interests of the people that we represent?
I do agree with my right honourable friend, and that is why the Prime Minister has taken this decision.
Dame Angela Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What we have seen in the last month is one of the largest humiliations that this country has ever experienced. And it's directly as a result of the current Prime Minister's agenda, which she set out to the tiny sliver of UK people that voted for her to be the Prime Minister. Now, the Right Honourable Lady is perhaps auditioning to be the next one along, because surely she knows that this humiliated Prime Minister simply cannot last.
Look, this, as I said in my opening remarks, this will have been a very difficult decision for the Prime Minister, and she has taken it because it is in the national interest, and she should have all of our support in doing so.
Peter Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I was the financial director of a PLC and I went to a board and suggested that we cut our revenues greatly and we wouldn't put up a tax increase next year, the director of the board would look at me and say, well, that's good. So, Peter, what are the spending implications and how is it going to be funded? And unfortunately for the previous Chancellor, he didn't provide those answers. We had a statement lasting 2.5 hours instead of a budget which should have been debated for 23 or 24 hours. So would the Leader of the House admit that that's the reason the Chancellor had to do? He produced a part budget, not the whole thing.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his remarks, and I hope that we will soon be able to hear from the Chancellor on these important matters, concerns for members of this House and also their constituents.
Ed Davey.
Speaker, the previous Prime Minister shattered the public's trust in the government. The current Prime Minister has trashed the British economy. Meanwhile, Conservative MPs have sat there and let it happen. So for the damage and pain they have caused across our country, will the Leader of the House, on behalf of our whole party, address the people and businesses of our great country and apologise?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. We have made this change for a reason, and I understand that people want certainty and reassurance about their bills, their businesses and their benefits. And I am sorry that the events leading to the changes today have added to the concerns about the major volatility that was already there existing in the economy. That's why we are putting it right today, and what my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be speaking about in his announcement shortly.
Richard Graham.
Speaker, the country is waiting to hear from the Chancellor on issues of fiscal responsibility, market stability and sustainable growth. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that what this entirely unnecessary debate shows is that the opposition are putting politics before the interests of our constituents?
I agree with my honourable friend completely.
Hilary Benn.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House said yesterday that what the country needs is stability and not a soap opera. I agree with her. So can she explain to the House why the Prime Minister is still in office when it's clear to almost everyone, including many of her colleagues behind her today, that she is no longer in power?
I think it is incredibly important today that the Chancellor be allowed to set out the policy changes that is made, to provide answers to this House and the country, and we can restore some certainty to the growth programme. That is what will help stability, and I would ask all honourable members to consider in their questioning to me how those questions will help that scenario.
Stephen Crabb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pragmatism, dealing with the world as it is, those are traditional strengths of Conservatives in government. And the fiscal changes being announced by the new Chancellor today are entirely correct. Does my right honourable friend agree with me, though, that the very last thing that's needed right now, the last thing that mortgage holders need, people struggling to get on the housing ladder, people worried about paying their fuel bills, the very last thing they need right now is further political instability upsetting markets?
My right honourable friend is right, and we also need to put through legislation to enact some of the measures that will help with the cost of living issues people are facing. We need time on the floor of this House to do that, and we also need to give the public some certainty about the future.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Turbulence in the markets, though, and the reason that the Chancellor was replaced is not just about tax, it's about trust. And trust in the British government comes from the knowledge that it enjoys the consent of the British people. How does she think that's going?
Leave the House.
I think that the Chancellor should be able to come to the floor of the House and outline his policies. This is a serious moment. We want to ensure that the markets are reassured, and I would suggest that any questions she has on economic policy are directed to the Chancellor.
Alberta Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In giving the answer that she did to the Leader of the Opposition, my right honourable friend has abundantly demonstrated to this House what an enormous asset she is to the governing party. And can I just ask the right honourable lady, does she agree with me that any single Conservative MP would make a fantastic Chancellor, well above any socialist or separatist opposite?
I think in terms of the opposition's performance, I think Larry the Cat would give them a run for their money.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, I and my colleagues take no joy in the difficulties which the government and the country finds itself in at present, because of course it affects all of our constituents. And would the Leader of the House not agree with me that for most people watching this today, they don't want to see political point scoring or in-house backstabbing? They want to know how they're going to be able to afford to pay their mortgages, how they're going to meet their cost of living, and how they're going to make decisions about their businesses.
Leader of the House.
The right honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and lovely though I am, I think people want to hear from the Chancellor. They want to hear the detail of the policies that are changing. They want to be able to, members will want to be able to ask him about how that is going to affect their constituents. That is what we should be focusing on today.
John Lavin.
Mr. Speaker, I very much welcome the speed at which the new Chancellor has acted, but can the Leader of the House confirm that the Chancellor and all members of the Government will continue to work with colleagues in the backbenches to ensure that we are able to communicate the great successes of this Conservative Government to all parts of the nation?
Well, thank you. I know the Chancellor wants to work with all members of this House in the interests of all of our constituents, and I hope that there will be also opportunities to talk about our record in government and how we've transformed this country for the better since 2010.
John Warrer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House's response to this urgent question was, quite frankly, ridiculous, claiming that the Prime Minister cowering in some corner somewhere is courageous. It does not take courage to crash our economy.
No.
It takes reckless arrogance and a disregard for ordinary people's working lives. And equally, it does not take courage to sack her Chancellor after barely a month. It takes total desperate opportunism. So will she admit that what it will take to restore our fiscal credibility and the confidence of the markets is a Labour government?
The Prime Minister's actions did take courage, personal courage, and it was the right thing to do in the national interest. I think the right thing to do in the national interest is let the Chancellor give his statement.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it was during the pandemic and £450 billion spent, whether it is Ukraine and 100,000 refugees who are now in our country that our constituents are looking after, or whether it is the hardships of the energy crisis, can my right honourable friend tell us that this government will always do what is necessary to step up to the plate and help the most vulnerable people in society across in our country and the rest of the world?
Of the House.
As I'm sure the Chancellor will say, we are in very volatile times. The war in Ukraine is not just a war against the people of Ukraine. It is an economic war against other nations too. And we will always do the right thing in those circumstances.
Then Sybil Roberts.
The new Chancellor's veneer of fiscal responsibility fails to disguise that imposing more painful austerity is a political choice made to save the absentee Prime Minister from the consequences of her ideological experiment. With Welsh Government already facing a shortfall of over £4 billion over 3 years and public services close to buckling, further austerity will entrench the vast wealth inequalities that characterise this disunited kingdom. Will she admit that now even the pretence of levelling up is dead?
Well, I would ask the Honourable Lady to remember that we have given the largest budget ever to the devolved administrations. But against the backdrop of coming into government where there was no money left, we still have managed to hold down fuel duty, introduce a living wage, create a modern welfare system where people are better off, and got nearly 4 million people into work.
Robbie Moore.
Mr. Speaker, I share the government's desire to reduce the tax on working people, but of course we must ensure stability in the markets because these go hand in hand, and therefore I welcome the Chancellor's announcement to the markets earlier this morning. So can my right honourable friend confirm that the government is working with the OBR and others in developing policy for the upcoming medium-term fiscal plan?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his remarks. He is absolutely right to stress the importance of stability, and I think that will be helped by the Chancellor being able to make his statement.
To Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House suggests that we should be grateful that the Prime Minister has made a difficult decision, and I presume she means grateful that she stuck to it, given the number of U-turns that we've seen over the last couple of days. But that's the job, making difficult decisions. There are difficult decisions to be made about what is happening in Ukraine, about the fact that President Putin has nuclear weapons, about the chaos caused by Brexit, gang crime, the climate crisis, Ebola in Africa. And all we know right now is, unless she tells us otherwise, that the Prime Minister is cowering under her desk and asking for it all to go away. Isn't it about time she did and let somebody else who can make decisions in the British national interest get in charge instead?
Well, the Prime Minister is not under a desk, as the Honourable Lady. I can assure the House. I can assure the House that she is. With regret, she is not here for a very good reason. But neither has she taken this decision to win the Honourable Lady's gratitude. She's done it out of a sense of duty because she knows what's in the national interest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend said, it will have been a difficult decision for the Prime Minister, both politically and also personally, because of her loyalty to my right honourable friend from Spelthorne. but it's vital that we provide economic stability for families and businesses in constituencies like mine and across the country. And we've already seen that this morning from the Chancellor. So does she agree with me that it's high time that this House heard from the Chancellor about how we are going to provide that stability?
Yes.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. We know that the Prime Minister is now not in power. We know that there has been a coup because the Prime Minister should be here to defend her decisions today. We want to know from the Prime Minister why her economic plan has been trashed just weeks after it was announced. We want to know from her whether she is sorry for the misery she has caused to millions of people across this country. We want to know, on behalf of those who now have new mortgages at higher interest rates for the foreseeable future, whether she's sorry for her actions. The Prime Minister, she says, isn't cowering away. So if she isn't cowering away, will she be here to sit by the Chancellor and to show her confidence in the new plans to the country?
I know it is not usually in the nature of the honourable gentleman to overly dramatise a situation. But I don't think there has been a coup. What I do agree with what he said is these are serious matters for our constituents, and I hope that all honourable members will be able to question the Chancellor and get answers they need for their constituents.
Jerome Mayo.
Mr. Speaker, fiscal credibility is always the backbone of any growth policy, so I welcome the actions of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But just as important are pro-growth reforms to back entrepreneurs and businesses. So can the Leader of the House confirm to me that the Government will continue to review EU-inspired regulations to make them bespoke for the UK economy, deliver pro-growth investment zones right across the country and boost our energy supply?
I can give my honourable friend that assurance. This is really important to our communities. We will continue with our programme of on EU law and EU retained law, also on our enabling regulation the Department for Trade is looking at, and also on investment zones, which there has been an enormous number of expressions of interest.
Bill Esterson.
In her initial answer to the urgent question, the Leader of the House blamed international circumstances. But if that's true, why is it that people in this country face paying more in their increases in mortgage payments than elsewhere in the world? And if it's true, why did the former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England say yesterday that the crash in the markets is the result of unique circumstances in the UK? Wouldn't it be better for her and for the Prime Minister to admit that they got it wrong and that they are responsible as a first and necessary step in rebuilding confidence in the markets?
Well, I would point the honourable gentleman to mortgage rates elsewhere in the world, but also suggests he raises this with the Chancellor, who is waiting to give a statement.
Dr. Kieran Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the change of approach, and I think it was the right decision to take in the circumstances. At times like this, our constituents still do want to be reassured. They're worried about their bills. Can you confirm for our constituents in the whole House that our plan to help people with their bills this winter remains in place?
I can give him that assurance. The Chancellor's statement today is incredibly important, and people will want to hear about the package that we're bringing forward to help on energy prices, but also other measures as well to help with cost of living.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've just seen the back of one Tory Prime Minister for trampling over standards in public life, only for them to be replaced by another who in just 40 days has herself failed to meet at least 3 of the Nolan principles. I'd love to ask the Prime Minister herself about it, but given that she's not here, I ask the Leader of the House, is it leadership to sack your Chancellor for doing exactly what he was asked to do? Is it objectivity to refuse to allow the OBR experts to assess the so-called mini-budget? And does she agree that the first test of accountability is to actually show up?
Leader of the House.
I would suggest to her that it is leadership to take tough decisions in the national interest, even though they may be personally and politically difficult to take.
And a fair.
Mr. Speaker, the party opposite stood on a manifesto that would have inflicted the highest ever tax burden on my constituents. So does my right honourable friend that Labour can never be trusted to support the hard-working people of the UK or Southend West?
The honourable lady is not wrong.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Mr. Speaker, Pendleton Leisure Centre, a flagship council development to tackle health inequalities in an area of high deprivation which seldom enjoys such investment, was suspended last week, largely, I'm told, as a result of the government's economic car crash and the prospect of more public spending cuts to come. Will the Leader of the House apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister to the people of Salford?
Leader.
Well, this is, although this is not business questions, if the honourable lady would like to give me the details of that case, I'd be happy to take it up.
Simon Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend assure the House and my constituents in Clwyd South that this government will always pay its way and make whatever tough decisions are necessary to ensure that we go for growth in a responsible and conservative way?
I can give him that assurance, and the Chancellor will be along shortly to give him some more details.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Leader of the House, who does she consider does a U-turn better, the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Scottish Tories?
Well, I live in hope that the honourable gentleman and his party might do a U-turn and decide to honour the democratic vote in a referendum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since being elected, I've spent 3 years working on the Health Select Committee with the now Chancellor. He's got an eye for detail and compassion as well. Isn't he exactly the right person to come forward and stabilise and demonstrate to the markets how difficult it can be in turbulent times? But he is the man to bring us forward.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for those remarks about the new Chancellor. I think that is precisely why the Prime Minister has chosen him.
Dave Dynage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of the national interest and also to offer further reassurance to the markets, can the Leader of the House just confirm that the Prime Minister will not be taking any decisions on economic policy in the future?
Leader of the House.
Affection for the honourable lady, and I'm sure the whole House appreciates her question. But the Prime Minister and her Chancellor and her Cabinet will be taking these decisions in the future, and the decision that she has taken over the weekend, although personally difficult for her, is the right one for the nation.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House has mentioned a couple of times now that the Prime Minister has taken difficult decisions. Can I please enlighten her that these are not difficult decisions? Difficult decisions are what are facing our constituents, choosing whether they can actually turn the lights on, finding out how they can heat their homes and how they can feed their children. Don't our constituents and those people deserve an answer from our Prime Minister and not an answer about just saying our Chancellor will come and tell us later?
Well, the honourable lady will want to hear from the Chancellor, because she will be able to ask him the precise questions that are of interest to her constituents. This government has always protected people against the cost of living, and it has always protected the most vulnerable in our society, and we will continue to do that.
Mr. Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, can I say to the Leader of the House that she and her colleagues do not have a monopoly on the understanding of what it is to take difficult decisions in the national interest. In 2010, my colleagues and I entered government and took many difficult decisions for which we paid a political price. We did that because it was in the national interest. We did it on the advice of the Bank of England, and we set up the Office of Budget Responsibility as a consequence. The Prime Minister would also be part of that government, At what point did she think it was no longer necessary to listen to the Bank of England and the OBR?
Well, can I first thank the right honourable gentleman for raising the issues we faced in 2010 when we came in. People will remember the note outlining that was no money left. What is less well understood is the scorched earth policy that accompanied it to tie an incoming government into all kinds of contractual difficulties to make their job so much harder. That is why those on the opposition benches should never be allowed near government. And I would say to the honourable gentleman that the Chancellor will be along shortly to answer questions about the OBR.
Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it absolutely incredible that the Leader of the House is incredulous that people might want to hear from the Prime Minister. As if it's like, a political game to ask the leader of our country questions. It is an embarrassing thing to assert. But in the national interest, and she so wants to hear from the Chancellor, can I ask her to be completely honest, because nothing that we've seen has been honest. I apologise.
It's not of an individual, it's withdrawn. Right, carry on.
Oh, yeah, because it wasn't an individual. OK. Good hope. Can I ask her, why is it, because we had to have the statement earlier at 11 o'clock while I was on the train, when you can actually get on a train, why the markets needed reassuring?
Well, the first thing I would say to the honourable lady is I fully appreciate the optics of me appearing at the dispatch box, but there is a very genuine reason why the Prime Minister is not here today, and I would just stress to you that it is not, I can understand people wishing to make political hay over it. She would wish to be here, but she is not able to at this moment. And the Chancellor will be along shortly to answer these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Friday, the value of the pound fell after the Prime Minister walked out after just over 8 minutes from her press conference. Isn't it increasingly the case that she and her government are a risk to Britain's financial stability? And isn't it time she stopped shirking, turned out to be held accountable, or get out of the way and call a general election?
Well, I would just stress again to all honourable colleagues that there is a very good reason why the Prime Minister is not here, and that the Chancellor will be making a statement shortly where you can ask him these questions.
David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the subject of the replacement of the Chancellor, given that he lasted 38 days in office and crashed the economy, can the Leader of the House confirm that the right honourable member for Spelthorne, the former Chancellor, will be rejecting his ministerial severance payment?
Leader.
I would not be involved in that decision at all, but the honourable member will know who he can write to find that out.
Ben Bradshaw.
She has claimed repeatedly that the Prime Minister has been courageous. But if the Prime Minister were really courageous, she would be here today, wouldn't she? If the Prime Minister cannot or won't come and explain to the British people the reasons for her humiliating U-turns and to apologise to them, as she just did from the dispatch box, for the damage the tourism she had done to this country and living standards and businesses, what is the point of her?
Leader of the House.
Well, I would refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave a little while ago about the Prime Minister, and again to the answer I gave a moment ago about the fact that I certainly regret the uncertainty that has added to already worries about the very volatile global economic situation, and that is why I'm keen and happy that we have a statement from the Chancellor today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister repeatedly declared that she was working in lockstep
with her Chancellor, but then very unceremoniously dumped her closest political friend at the earliest possible opportunity in order to temporarily save her job. And now, in the greatest of ironies, she has sent out the very right honourable lady to speak on her behalf, who is very desperately seeking to replace her. But, Leader of the House, I understand that Downing Street is hosting a reception this evening. Is it a wake?
Leader.
I would say to the honourable gentleman that the motivations for the Prime Minister taking the decisions that she has have been about the national interest. He may not appreciate, and I'm not asking him to, the courage and the duty that she felt to do that, but that is why she has done it.
Chris Stevens.
Mr Speaker, I just want to be clear, can the Leader of the House confirm then that the former Chancellor has been removed by the Prime Minister for acting on her instructions, and can she also confirm that the Prime Minister overruled the former Chancellor in the content of the financial statement before it was made? Because if both things are true, the Prime Minister needs to resign, doesn't she?
Prime Minister.
These are not matters for me. He may wish to raise matters with the Chancellor. I think what our constituents want to hear from us today is about the issues that are affecting them, and that is what the Chancellor will be speaking about whenever he gets to this chamber.
Wayne David.
Can I ask the Leader of the House, on behalf of the Prime Minister, will she simply say to the people of this country, we are sorry?
I have done so twice before in this UQ, and I will do so again. I know that this is an incredibly uncertain time for families and businesses across the country. The events that led up to the statement that is being made today are unfortunate, and I am pleased that the Prime Minister has taken decisive action to stabilise markets. And I'm sure that he will want to question the Chancellor on those detailed matters. I have done, and I'm happy to do so again.
Clive Bedford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We're told that the Prime Minister is going to be coming in here in a moment to join the Chancellor when he makes his statement, presumably propped up El Cid like Jolton Heston. But this should have been an opportunity for the Prime Minister to show leadership and to apologise to the nation before the dispatch box in the chamber of the House of Commons. Yet she's failed to do so. We've all heard the stories about our constituents up and down the country who have had mortgages withdrawn at the last minute, whose lives have been put on hold because of the reckless mini-budget that she agreed with her Chancellor. So doesn't the Leader of the House agree that it is reckless of the Prime Minister to not show that leadership today and be here in this chamber to be accountable for what she has done?
Leader.
I think the Prime Minister has shown leadership in taking the tough decision that she has, and not for the first time. If our Prime Minister, when she was Foreign Secretary, had not shown leadership, we would not, alongside European nations, be giving the support to Ukraine that we rightly should be proud of.
Kevin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The fact is that the Prime Minister was as courageous as the Leader of Search should be here answering questions this afternoon. The fact that the Prime Minister is unwilling to come to the House shows the complete lack of authority she now has. Week before the country, week before Parliament and week before the markets. Refusing to face parliamentary accountability for actions is not cowardice, it's a dereliction of duty. Does the Leader of the House not agree with me? It's well past time for this lame duck Prime Minister to go.
Leader.
The Prime Minister has come to this House many times, and in the previous role she's held, she's come to this House many times, often to talk about very difficult issues. There is a genuine reason, honourable members, why she is not here, and I hope that she will be able to join the House later this afternoon.
Dame Margaret Hodge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I wasn't going to rise to ask a question, but I've been concerned at some of the answers that the Leader of the House has given. If we are to stabilise the markets and restore some confidence in the economy, we have to have trust in the strong leadership of our country, and that is the role of the Prime Minister. She has said a number of times that there are good reasons why the Prime Minister is not here this afternoon. In the interests of total transparency and in the interests of proper accountability and to restore confidence in markets, will she give us those reasons?
Leader.
The Right Honourable Lady will have to be content with my assurances. I can't disclose the reasons. I have asked if I can. I'm being very genuine with the House on this matter. I hope that she'll be able to join us a bit later on this afternoon. But both the Prime Minister and her Chancellor and her Cabinet are determined to take the tough decisions to ensure that we have stability and confidence going forward. And I hope that the Chancellor's statement will reassure the Right Honourable Lady.
Chris Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To be honest, I just thought it was utterly shabby to sack the Chancellor of the Exchequer for doing precisely what he'd been told to do by the boss. It's like when you sack the staff for messing up yourself. It's not on, it's bad form, it's not honourable, it's despicable. But what really worries me is that you can't really govern if you don't have a mandate. You can't govern if you can't get your budget through this House, because by definition that shows that the House does not have confidence in you. Every honourable government previous to this, at that moment when it's evident that they couldn't get their budget through, has resigned and allowed a general election. Isn't that what should happen now?
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that I think it is an honourable thing to act in the national interest, even if it is incredibly difficult personally and politically for someone to do that. And that all members on this side of the House were elected in 2019 as a team on a manifesto that we are determined to deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady has said many times that the Prime Minister couldn't come here for a specific reason at this time. So could I ask the Leader of the House, is there a reason why the Prime Minister decided she didn't want to make a statement to the House? Because she could have chosen any time to do that, even at 10 p.m. Does the Leader of the House not think that we as elected MPs and the public in this country deserve to hear from the Prime Minister?
I'm sure there will be many opportunities to hear from the Prime Minister, some in the next 24 hours, but given the nature of the statement today, it is appropriate that the Chancellor delivers it.
Brendan O'Hara.
Whether she's under her desk or behind a couch, people rightly view the Prime Minister's sacking of the Chancellor as a particularly unedifying act of self-preservation, given that he was thrown under the bus for saying exactly what she asked him to say. It would be like the ventriloquist Ray Allen sacking Lord Charles for saying the wrong thing. So will the Leader of the House join me now in asking the ventriloquist dummies on her own benches who demanded that the Scottish Government follow this insane economy-wrecking policy to apologise to the people of Scotland?
Leader of the House.
Well, the first thing I would say is to thank him for the fact that the public might be concerned for the former Chancellor. But I think what they are really going to be concerned about is their own household budgets and their businesses. And that is why it is important this decision was taken, and we will hear from the Chancellor shortly. With regard to his other point, I would just point out that there are many people, including many people in Scotland, who would like the First Minister to apologise for some of her decisions.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With her economic plan much like a judgment in tatters, the fact she can't even be bothered to come to the chamber today, what is the point of the Prime Minister?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that insightful question. I repeat, the Prime Minister would normally be here, but there is a good reason why she isn't.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it true that the member for Spelthorne first found out that he was sacked on Twitter, rather than being told to his face?
Leader of the House.
Honourable and right honourable members of this House are obviously want to ask all kinds of questions. But I think what the public are worried about is the cost of living issues, the stability of the markets, the energy package that we will be putting through later today to help them with the cost of living. And I would just urge all colleagues to remember the context in which we are meeting this afternoon.
Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister on the way to the Palace?
I would very much like to be able to tell all honourable colleagues what the Prime Minister's business is today, but there are very serious matters as well as economic matters that are in the Prime Minister's in tray, and she, as people will know, she comes to this House on a regular basis and she'll be here tomorrow, but she's not able to be here at this precise moment.
Toby Perkins.
Mr. Speaker, the markets were spooked not just by the reckless mini-budget, but also by the sense that we had a Prime Minister incapable of answering questions at the end of a press conference and without any sort of grip on this government. So it is entirely legitimate for my right honourable friend from Holborn St Pancras to give her an opportunity to come and assure the markets. Isn't the reality that the Prime Minister's inability to answer questions is just as fundamental as the failure on policy in why this country is now in an economic crisis?
I'm buoyed up by the fact that the members on the opposition benches very much want to see the Prime Minister, and I hope that if she is able to join us this afternoon, that they will give her a big cheer when she does.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I accept what the Right Honourable Lady is saying about the Prime Minister not being here, that there may be a very good reason. And I also agree with her when she said frequently that we must be acting at the moment in the national interest. For me, the national interest is what is in the interest of our people, our constituents. And what they are telling me in Edinburgh West, and I'm sure very many of the rest of you, is that they no longer have any confidence in this Prime Minister. That while she may have had the courage to sack her partner in presenting the growth plan to the country, that what they would like is for her now to have the courage to accept that she was also wrong and to step down. So will the Right Honourable Lady and her Cabinet colleagues please take that message back to the Prime Minister wherever she is?
Leader of the House.
Well, I think that the Prime Minister, in her current role and previous roles, has always acted in the national interest, and she will continue to do so. Her government will continue to support her. What we need, this country needs some stability and some assurance now, and she always takes decisions in the national interest.
Davis.
Mr. Speaker, as the new Chancellor has reversed all the economic promises made by the Prime Minister in her election campaign to become Prime Minister, and that very Chancellor had the fewest votes in that leadership election, he was thrown out with 18, doesn't this show that the next Prime Minister should not be chosen by the members opposite and their wider membership, but by the British people in a general election as soon as possible to get this country back on track?
The House.
Well, I think there are serious questions that we should be examining as a Parliament today, and I hope that we will soon move on to the Chancellor's statement. I think that is what our constituents are concerned and worried about, and not about events within the Westminster bubble.
Matt Weston.
Speaker, obviously this is an absolutely legitimate question that's been put forward today. The public wants to know why the Prime Minister sacked her Chancellor after just 38 days, and particularly given that she was co-architect of the plans, the economic plans, why she herself has not resigned.
Yeah. Leader.
Tomorrow, I think we are having, or later in the week, we are having Prime Minister's questions. Members have an opportunity every week to put questions to the Prime Minister.
Bishop Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The pound is falling off a cliff, interest rates are soaring, inflation is rocketing, and pensions have been on the verge of collapse. We have a new Chancellor who is the de facto Prime Minister, and a Prime Minister who has been reduced to a spectator as her own MPs plot her removal. The Honourable Lady today, the Leader of the House, has defended the Prime Minister today, but can I ask her, does she think if she had won the leadership contest, she would have been a better Prime Minister?
Leader of the House.
I support the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has shown great courage and duty over the last few days. And she has my admiration and respect for that. The Honourable Lady has various criticisms of her. I would stand our Prime Minister against her First Minister any day of the week.
Charlotte Nettles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Local public services in Warrington have been slashed to pieces over the last 12 years, and we are finding it increasingly difficult to meet the demand for basic statutory services, let alone before inflation started rocketing, pushing costs of delivery up. Any more cuts will mean collapse. The Prime Minister spent last week promising no cuts to public spending and boasting about her 2-year energy price freeze. So does she have any say at all on government economic policy?
Leader of the House.
Well, the Honourable Lady can put her questions to the Chancellor shortly, but what I would point out is that clearly all organisations are facing rising costs. That is in part why we have acted so swiftly, and even today we'll be putting through legislation to help with the business and cost of living.
Richard Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been in office for 6 weeks, but notoriously, even with the rigours of the budget, is yet to find time to call the First Minister of Scotland or the First Minister of Wales. Does the Leader of the House think that the Prime Minister will remain in office long enough to be able to do so?
I know that the Prime Minister takes her responsibilities. I know that the Prime Minister takes her responsibilities to working constructively with the other administrations, and she will always do that.
Justin Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the markets will be reassured to see the Prime Minister is not hiding under a desk, but is here in the House today. She's still got till 10 o'clock tonight to answer questions that have been asked if she wants to reassure the markets and create some stability. But I've got another question for the Leader of the House. I've been drawing Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. Can she guarantee that the current Prime Minister will be answering them?
Leader of the House.
Yes.
Christian Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Throwing your Chancellor under the bus in order to save your skin is not a tough decision. Tough decisions are when you make them and then come along, show true leadership and ask people to come with you by inspiring them. This Prime Minister has done none of that. So why should we follow her when she has shown no leadership whatsoever but has hidden away?
The House.
I think that if you spoke to any member of the Ukrainian Parliament, they would tell you that our Prime Minister has shown leadership.
Jed Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Urgent business, we are told by the Leader, prevented the Prime Minister from coming to the House. What on earth could have been more urgent than coming to atone for the economic chaos that she has wrought on pension holders and mortgage payers across these islands, and especially in Scotland, where the party opposite enjoy no mandate whatsoever? The Prime Minister thanked her former Chancellor for the excellent work that he had done. Can the Leader of the House explain, or maybe now the Prime Minister's turned up, she can the Leader of the House explain, thanked for what?
Leader of the House.
The honourable gentleman will know that the Prime Minister has Prime Minister's questions every single week. He can put questions to her there. There was very good reason, as I have repeatedly explained to the House, why she couldn't be here. You will notice that she is present here now. And I will start listening to the honourable gentleman on democratic mandates when he honours the results of the Scottish referendum.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Leader of the House for her answers, but I'm not in the business of point scoring. Does the Leader of the House not agree that the face behind the budget is much less important than what the budget outlines? Is there confidence that the Chancellor can help business, help people stay in work, ensure that funding is available for the NHS and government departments cannot take further austerity, so that all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can truly be better together?
Well, the honourable gentleman is held in great affection by all members of this House. and is often the finale at such UQs because he is full of common sense. And I think that what he says is absolutely right. And I hope now we will be able to hear from the Chancellor very shortly.
Point of order.
Is it relevant to the questions? Order. If it's relevant to this, I will take the point of order. Chris Brown.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, you know that for the last hour we've been listening to questions about which were meant to be directed to the Prime Minister. The Leader of the House said repeatedly that there were reasons that the Prime Minister couldn't be here. If there were legitimate reasons, I'm sure every single member of this House would want to hear them. Now that the Prime Minister has arrived, would this not be a perfect opportunity for her to be able to explain why she was not able to be here?
Order. Just to say, and let's just put this to bed, it's not for me, it's for the government to put forward the ministers to respond to urgent questions once granted. And it's not a matter for the chair. The honourable member has put the point on the record, and I know that the Prime Minister is now in her place, but we now come, before I call the Chancellor to make his statement.
Just get up and tell us. Go on.
Order. Mr Bradshaw, I expect better. I want you to be silent while I read this out. This is very important. Before I call the Chancellor to make his statement, I would like... Does somebody... Yes, and I think so. It's a few times today. And that's the third apology. I don't want any more. Before I call the Chancellor to make his statement, I'd like to point out that British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. So I now call the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, the central responsibility of any government is to do what is necessary for economic stability. Behind the decisions we take and the issues on which we vote are jobs, families,